Well, I'm very pleased to say that I'm sitting here with Judea Pearl on July 26th, 2022 in Los Angeles. I'm David Brock, and this is an oral history interview as part of the ACM History Committee's Turing Award project. So, Professor Pearl, thank you once again for agreeing to do this with us. And to begin at the beginning, I believe you were born in Tel Aviv in September of 1936.
Perfectly, yeah. I remember that it was Tel Aviv, 1936.
Yeah. And could you tell us a little bit about your family background and how your family came to that area?
Okay, my family came from Poland. My father and his family came in 1924, and when it was open border, and people were, in the first few years of the mandate, of the British mandate, they really encouraged Jewish immigration to the land of Palestine at that time. And my father and his family came there and established a biblical town, in the sense that they bought the land from a real estate agent in Jaffa, and they found a place 7.5 miles northeast of Jaffa called Ibn Ibrak, which was the Arabic name for an ancient biblical town named Bnei Brak. And they found it. It used to be hut houses and few scattered trees, according to the newspaper of the time. And they tried to establish a religious cultural town, okay, which was unique at the time. I said agricultural town, yeah. And they grew radishes and they grew cows, and they sent my grandfather to Damascus to buy good cows, not one of those cheap. And he returned bloody with one cow, and so on. So there were long stories of how they established a town, which was my hometown. There wasn't a hospital in my hometown, so my mother went to a hospital in Tel Aviv to give birth to me. Oh, my mother, I should say, came later, in 1935, where it was Hitler's hand was already on the wall, and millions of Jews flocked the British consulate in Poland to get a certificate to come, but the British locked the door. In 1935 already, they only gave 15,000 certificates per year, and she managed to come because my father went to Poland, and as a British subject, he was able to find a bride. He was a very sought-after bachelor, having a British subject status. And so despite his dark skin and his, I would say, lack of education, he wasn't academician, he was a farmer, right? And he came to Poland, and he found a princess, which was my mother. So she managed to come back in 1935. I say come back, and because she left her family over there, and their fate was dictated by the British white paper. Okay, so she lost all her family there. So I was born in 1935 in that town, and I was treated as I would say with a silver teaspoon in my mouth, because I was supposed to be the new Jew who doesn't know about anti-Semitism, who doesn't know about the diaspora, is going to be the embodiment of the free Jew. So I haven't learned about the Holocaust, and what's going on in the war in which I grew. Because when I was about, I would say 6 or 7 years old, I found my mother crying in the kitchen, and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, you know, there's war in Europe." I said, "So what? War come and wars go." And we go on and said, "No, this is different kind of a war." And I couldn't understand what she's talking about. I only understood later. But to come back to the topic, I was really treated as a prince. Not only me, my generation were treated as special, because we grew up in the period where there was a new nation born. And everything that was done there was with the idea that we are creating here a model society which never existed before, and it's going to be a light for the nations. And it turned out to be a light to the nation, but that's a separate story when we go there later. So, and I got a very, very good education, excellent education, because my teachers were professors that came from Germany, from Heidelberg and Berlin, and they couldn't find a job in academia, so they became teachers in high school, and they saw in us the embodiment of their dreams, of their scientific dreams. So they invested in us everything that they had, and they had a lot. Each one of them was a polyglot, could talk without notes on any subject, from the economy of Manchuria to the proof of Pythagoras' theorem. Okay, so I was lucky, with the rest of my generation, to have this educational experiment, which unprecedented.
Do you think that those professors of yours from high school shared that same, in addition to kind of shifting their attention of you as their new pupils, you know, with the change in their careers, do you think that they also shared that same sense that your family and your community had about this generation of young Israelis?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I should say everybody in that period was fully active in the act of creating a new state. Okay. There were, when I was born, there were, I would say, about 450,000 Jews under the British mandate at that time. And we all had one mission: to get the European Jews out of Europe. One mission, and to build in the infrastructure for a new state. The infrastructure was already prepared in 1935 when I was born. I didn't see any deficiency in any of the infrastructure capabilities or facilities that you have today in California, in the sense that education, water supply, electricity, healthcare, all the facilities were already created. The government structure, everything was available, ready for a new state. And everyone's mind was focused, directed, committed, I would say, to one and only one mission. This is to create a model state, to create a home for the people who were stranded in Europe. Okay. That was my background. Okay. We used to sing in the buses as we went to summer camp. We used to scream and scream, down with the British government, down with the white paper, down Hebrew Hebrew state. And down with the white paper, I said already, a free immigration, aliyah chofshit. I can cite it to you in Hebrew if you want to hear the screaming of 11 years old boys in the bus, okay? Aliyah chofshit, buz lasefer halavan. Okay, you can cut it off. No,
No, absolutely won't cut that off. What was the language spoken in your household?
Oh, the language is very interesting. My language was Hebrew.
Okay.
Everything was in Hebrew. Yiddish was another language spoken by the old people who couldn't make the transformation. It's spoken by my parents too when they didn't want us to understand. But I learned to understand Yiddish very clearly. They spoke then Polish when they really didn't want me to understand what they're saying. So that was the language. The language in school was Hebrew. That was a decision that was made already in 1913, I should say, when the Technion was founded. Okay, they had a committee, plus they had a controversy that everybody took part of. How should they teach technical material? Okay, mathematics when there are no technical terms for things like electron and proton and neutrinos. Okay, and the country was in uproar, and the decision was made in 1913 to teach in Hebrew, even in the Technion. Okay, even though most of the teachers were German and spoke German, the Technion was not established until 1925. Okay, the building was built in 1925, but the decision was made in 1913 that the language will be Hebrew. And indeed, I learned all the terminology. Part of them were translated into Hebrew, like transformer was Shanai and other things, okay? Transistor remained transistor because because I think the Hebrew name was too cumbersome. So a few terms remains in English, and most of the lessons were in Hebrew. Yeah. And to come back to your question, our teachers were devoted and committed to this idea that they are preparing a new generation and that the future of the model state lies in science, in excellence, in science and in art and entrepreneurship, but they are preparing a generation for a model state. So that was the psyche at the time. Okay.
I went to another question about your household.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there are like very strong themes in a household, like education or religion or politics. And I just wondered what mix of themes were in your household. I saw, for example, a reference to the fact that I believe that you went to an explicitly socialist kindergarten. So what was that mix in your household?
Okay, in terms of the political ideology, amazingly, despite the fact that my grandfather and the 26 other families who founded the town had an image of a religious town, that was the purpose of their coming. Okay, I grew up in a totally mixed community. I marched in May 1st, International Workers' Day, with a big band, and I sang the international anthem. Yes, and I went to a kindergarten which was a socialistic kindergarten, used to call kindergarten of the working family. Okay. However, in grade 1, I switched to a religious school. Okay. My neighbors were totally mixed. All my friends were, I would say, on the socialistic part, or I'll call them secular. Okay. Secular. part of the town was religious, part of the town was secular. They closed the gate on Saturday and Friday night, okay? So cars would not be able to come in, okay? They hung the horn when 5 p.m. on Friday night, but people knew how to sneak in, and it was a comfortable coexistence between these two factions. I don't remember any skirmishes or any, I would say, hostility between the two. Perhaps sometimes when a car sneaked through on Saturday afternoon, okay, they would chase it with stones or something. But that's all. Otherwise, it was beautiful, harmonious coexistence. Yeah. And it has changed. It has changed recently. I could not go into my hometown without a visa. I'm just kidding. Not a visa. But I would put on my yarmulke just to feel accepted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As a young person, how did reading factor into your life?
Reading?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the atmosphere at home was, of course, reverent for learning, encouragement for learning. But since my parents were not academic, right, they could not give me any help in studies, but they encouraged me in any way possible. When I sat down to do homework, then it was clear that my brother and sister should be quiet, because I am doing homework. It's like a holy time. Okay. So my mother went to see the teacher in, I think, my 4th grade, and I was worried that he called her because I was rowdy in school. So I said, "What have I done again?" And it turns out he wanted to tell her that I'm doing fine and that she should give me all possible encouragement. He told her, "Sell all your possessions, but give him education." Okay. She was very happy, and I was surprised. I mean, you mean this teacher knows me? Because I didn't excel or stood out in class. So on one hand, from my side, it was surprise that he pays attention to me. On her side, it was happiness that I have potential. And she gave me all the encouragement possible. Yeah. In what way? Books. We had books from the library. And she was gracious enough to register me to the library, to which I went twice a week and borrowed the book. Okay. And literature-wise, we grew on Russian literature, world literature, Dickens and Maupassant, and this is a kind of translations that we grew up with, and they were translated very early, all the classics. Okay. So I grew up on the classics. I read a lot. I remember, I feel like I grew up in Russia. because I read Tolstoy and I read Gogol and I knew this stuff. So whenever I meet a Russian today, I said, "Hello."
Was there anything in your early life that you see connected to your later professional pursuits in mathematics and technical subjects?
I can't recall, because as I said, I did not excel in school. I was about the 3rd or 4th in class in ranking, but I wasn't as good as the geniuses. The geniuses always stood there and said, "It's boring, they're boring. They knew the stuff ahead of time." And for me, it wasn't boring. It was Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So that is the time. And one thing I remember, and maybe it reflects on my temperament even today. And this was in Kita Head. It must be in grade 5. I was 10 years old. And there was a big discussion of how many square meters you have in a square kilometer. And I said, you had a million. I'm not going to say a million kilometers, yeah, a million. And kids laughed at me. Said, you have 1,000 because it's 1,000, right? It's 1,000 by 1,000 meters, so you have 1,000 meters. And they went to the math teacher and asked him, what do you think? And he said, it's 1,000. Ha! They all laughed at me and they mocked at me, you see? And I went home and I said, I don't know. I couldn't believe it. The math teacher will side with them and not listen to me, okay? And I didn't have the vocabulary to prove it to them 4 by 4 or something like that. But I remember being in class and I said, I'm going to go back to him. I'm not going to give up. And I went back to him and eventually he apologized to the class.
Wow.
Okay. But I felt terrible. I felt the sort of that I have to stand for the truth despite what everybody says, okay? And now this I still retain.
I can see that it's quite some foreshadowing of what happens later.
But it stuck in my mind, you know, that a community, the whole community, every kid in class laughed at me, okay? So it was a community consensus that I'm wrong and I'm stupid, okay? And the teacher, the guru, gives a stamp on the community consensus, and I'm home. I remember that and say, I'm not going to give up. Yeah, so that's why did it stuck in me? So why did it stick in me? I don't know. Apparently, it left an impression. Yeah.
Could you tell us about the decision to? Your high school was in Tel Aviv, is that correct? Yeah. So how was that a big decision for you to go to high school in Tel Aviv, or was that kind of where everyone in the town was going?
No, it was a privilege to go to a municipal school run by the city, okay, with a religious orientation. And they gave a quota. The city of Tel Aviv had a quota for the suburbs. We were considered suburbs. And 4 people from my town were chosen to enter the high school in Tel Aviv. Yeah. And I remember being happy, getting the information. There were 4 of us. And going for an interview with my future principal. And he interviewed me and interviewed my mother. And I was younger than the rest. I was 17. I'm talking here. I was 13 while the others were 14. So he tried to convince my mother to send me 1 year to yeshiva so that I will mature and come with the right spiritual strength, and then I will go into that. I said, no way. I resisted it. My mother she called me in and said, what do you think? I had the answer right there. No way. No. Anyway, I was accepted and was given the chance to be part of this very good school, very good high school. Yeah, we have other choices because we had a local school. I'm not sure it was already in action, perhaps, but it wasn't as reputable as the one that I went to in Tel Aviv. So I was really lucky. Yeah, they had a lot of extracurriculum activities. I remember our math teacher gave extra hours in the afternoon for children who want to get advanced topic, and gave us a feeling that we are just about to make new mathematics. Each one of us has the potential of being an Einstein. Okay, just work at it and play with it, and it's possible. We had a good music teacher every Tuesday afternoon. He used to come here and come to our class and play classical music. He played the music that we are about to hear in the evening, where the Israeli Philharmonic is going to have a concert 8 o'clock in the evening. So he gave introduction to the pieces that will be played tonight. He spent with us 3-4 hours, and we listened enchanted. A guy can play a Mozart symphony on a piano and explain it so nice. So I had good education, very well rounded. Okay, I didn't like chemistry, so I still don't know chemistry.
But your connection to mathematics and science certainly deepened in this period. Is that true?
It was created in high school because it was playful. Mathematics was playful constantly and human-oriented. I mean, we knew the names of all the Greek mathematicians, and when we had the theorem, we had the name of the inventor of the theorem on the wall. The name was talking to us. His life story, if it was available, was given to us. So we learned from person to person. So mathematics became a human endeavor, and not a textbook follow. And we also learned, I believe it was chronological, how things were invented, how one theorems got on top of another as opposed to a logical sequence. And that's also what I told Bill Gates when he asked me, what is the secret of your education? I told him, teach it chronologically and teach it from the point of view of the inventor. Yeah.
Well, for somebody who loves the history of science and technology, that is a very wonderful message.
Yeah,
for you
I don't think they
give.
Accomplish it. Yeah. Even in the Khan Academy, they go by the textbook. They don't go to the history. I think it's a mistake.
Was that historical approach evident in your science classes in addition to mathematics?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay.
In a science class too, yeah. Especially in college. In college I had more of that because each of the professors were really part of the invention.
Right.
And give us the feeling that he or she was part of the Cavendish laboratory where the electron was discovered, or part of, of a Rutherford laboratory in Manchester, I believe it was, right? So we were part of that discovery. It wasn't just a textbook recipe to follow. Yeah, and our teachers were great enough and confident enough to make us feel that way. Yeah, we are reinventing science together. Yeah.
Well, could you talk about your decisions about what to do, when you were graduating from high school? What you were thinking about, and
graduating from high school was a period of my rebellion. Well, my life was a rebellion, but this was a rebellion on ideological grounds. I moved from a religious-oriented environment into a secular environment, and I went to a secular kibbutz, which was part of the worker people, or worker party, a kibbutz movement. And I had to hide my conversion from my teachers. Because one teacher caught me without a yarmulke one time in the bus and told me, "Look, I can make you skip your graduation exams, okay? So don't make me find you without a yarmulke again." And okay, I got the message. I had to hide my conversion. And I went to a secular movement. It was in the last year of high school. And my ideal was to quit all this bourgeois life in which I grew up and to become a pioneer. Namely, half Bolshevik. I wouldn't call it Bolshevik because it sounds bad. Because at that time it was pioneer. Okay, like the people I read about in the books, yeah, and they were worshipping physical work, agricultural work, and I wanted to become a member of the kibbutz all my life, and that was my orientation when I finished high school and went to the Hachshara, which means preparation for the army. I remember my mother visiting me in that little camp, and she started crying because she saw 4 boys and 4 girls in the same tent. Mm-hmm. Oh, Yehuda. She flipped and said, "And how do you get dressed?" I said, "I asked him to turn around. She said, "Oh,
So was that experience on the kibbutz, was that part of your government service, or was it?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a special unit which served the army in 2 modes: agricultural work on one side and army duties on the other part. Okay, so we separated 2.5 years that I had to serve into 4 periods, partly working for the kibbutz and partly protecting it at night or preparing ourselves.
I see.
Yeah, so that's the old ideal of rifle on one hand and a plow in the other hand. It's the ideal on which we all grew up, you know.
And so how did that experience match your, did the reality of it match your hopes for it?
No. I was bored. When I worked with the apples there and with the chicken, I was really bored. So I saw right away that in the last year of my army service that I'm not going to stay in the kibbutz, and I prepared myself already to go into engineering. Okay. Why engineering? People told me if you are good in math, you go to engineering. Okay, so it would serve both to satisfy your mathematical skill, plus will give you a job in the post office. Okay, so that's what, and that's all the kind of jobs we could get at that time in Israel, because it was a period of austerity. Okay, there weren't really a fancy job in research or anything. Austerity, and I grew up in a time of austerity, because Israel grew by 3-fold, from 600,000 to 1.8 million at the end of 60, which means there was not any food. And no one went hungry because they had a ration system. And a good way to understand what ration meant was that my brother-in-law, when he went to a restaurant, he was bachelor, when he wanted an omelet, he would go to a restaurant and have an egg in his pocket. And would give him the egg, they would make an omelet for him. Okay, but but you had to bring the eggs that you were rationed with, and the piece of bread that you were rationed with. Everything was rationed. They could not. You had to have numbers for every commodity.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and no one went hungry because of that strict system. that prevented black market from created, to be created.
And when you say that, become an engineer and you could get a position with the post office, that's because was the post office also providing, all of the communications,
No,
for the
but of
country?
course it was a time where communication developed.
Right.
Yeah, the army needed communicators and civil service needed it. But this was the jobs that were available at that time, run by the government. Private companies I don't believe, were in existence at that time in the field of engineering. Right.
So could you describe for us your path to the Technion, how you got there and what it was like?
The path to Technion, yeah, in the summer between my army service and the beginning of the school year, I applied for the Technion, and I sat down and read books to be prepared for the entrance exam. And it wasn't easy. I didn't know any engineering, and I knew the theory of physics somehow from high school, but I really wanted to get in. So I read about 12-volume book on electricity. And I prepared well for the exam. I remember even the question they asked me. Well, I'll give you the question. It's very important, very interesting question. No, the point is, I remember the question, and I remember the unique way in which I solved it. And that's why it's stuck in my mind, because I give it to my grandchildren now and they can't solve it. Okay, I have to lead them. Okay, so you have a straw, a drinking straw, okay, with two sides, and you have a soap bubble on one side, soap bubble on the other side. Okay, one is big and one is small, and you let it go. What will happen? Will they equalize in size? Will the big one swallow the small one, or will nothing happen? Okay. Here a question, and I have to use my intuition and whatever I learned in high school. Okay. And I had a reasoning that I'm still proud until today. I said to myself, when I blow a bubble, what do I feel? I feel when it's large, when the bubble is large, it's easy for me to blow. When the bubble is small, it's hard for me. Okay? Which means the big one will swallow the small one. Right? That's what I did. I passed in flying colors. Okay. I even got a stipend because of my success.
And what was the institution like when you were there? You were there from 56 to 60, is that correct?
No, yes,
Oh,
from 57 to 60, yeah.
1957.
I started in 57,
Okay.
58, 59. The institute, how can I explain it? It was, one thing was different between the learning environment in the Technion and what I found here is that students were rowdy. But not rowdy in the negative sense, but in the positive sense. We must understand. And if we don't, it's the teacher's fault, not us. Okay? Which means we used to make noise with our chair. We used to, we don't understand. Hey, we wouldn't let the teacher go forward unless we all understood in real time what we was talking about. So that was, it was a revelation to me when I came here and I saw everybody polite and not understanding. And they told me we didn't understand what he's talking about. And I said, so why didn't you ask? Oh, I said, it's impolite. So that's the American system. That was one difference in the mode, which I can tell you. What else was different? I told you about the mode of learning, being part of science. We had a strike, a student strike, in the middle of my studies because the tuition was too high. So I remember going on strike, and I forgot how they settled it. And what else I remember that might be of interest here? But basically, it was hard. It was heavy work, and it was pointy. I remember a teacher coming in and saying, "What are you looking at me? Start drawing lines!" I said, "What kind of line? Doesn't matter. Start drawing lines. You do first and you understand later." I said, "Okay." All kind of jokes like that, okay? And there was one teacher who said, "Hey, you behave like Asiatic." Okay? At that time it was okay to say that. Because he came from Bulgaria, from the high echelon of scientific achievement, and we behaved like Asiatic. Okay.
And it was, and I believe I read somewhere that your future wife was also a student.
Right, yes. He was on the student. It's also interesting, we were 120 male and 4 girls at that time.
Wow.
I believe now it's 55-45 in female favor. Yeah, but that was interesting because especially in electrical engineering, there were more females in architecture and in fundamental studies, physics. But in engineering, 4 girls and 120 boys, sharks, I should say. And I was lucky enough to meet one of the 4 and marry her. And she passed away last year, about exactly a year from now. Yeah.
I'm very sorry for that. Could you tell us a little about her background and
Yes.
and was she also interested in electrical engineering along?
No,
with
she came from Iraq, so she were not spoon-fed. Okay, she was the opposite. I mean, she suffered from the Farhud, the name of the pogrom that they had in 1941 in Baghdad. And she was just go-getter. She was the one in the family who knew the Muslim dialect, so she could pass for Muslim in the street, and she was doing all the wheeling, dealing with the Muslims when things got to be rough. And so she came in 1950 or 51 in the big wave of immigration from Iraq, where they had few months of free movement, where the Jews of Iraq were allowed to leave their possession there, and taken to Cyprus, from Cyprus to Israel. And she has many stories about how they treated her in the airport, how they asked her to give few gifts to the clerks in charge, or else. So they came with almost nothing in their hand, and they lived in a tent city for about a year. But lucky enough, her father was a tailor who had connection with the London bank, from which he imported textile. Okay. So he arranged for, he had some reserve money in his account in London, which allowed them to buy an apartment in Tel Aviv in 1952. Okay. So she also went to the army in 1955 and managed to do her technical studies in the Technion in the evening. They had an arrangement where soldiers and people who need to work were able to take evening classes and make 2 years for 1 year of ordinary studies.
Right.
Okay. So she took this program, and she served in the Navy, and she taught mathematics in the Navy, okay, to high school kids or to future captains. Okay. Why? They need to know trigonometry.
Yeah.
That was the idea. Okay? No captain without trigonometry. So that was her job.
And she was doing that while you were finishing your studies?
She was 2 years in the evening program,
Okay.
while she was in the Navy teaching
Oh.
mathematics. Yeah. I was 1 year in the first year of college, and we met in the second year of my college. Yeah. So, and she eventually became here. She became a super software analyst. Yeah. In the sense that she advised on diagnosis and debugging of highly sophisticated software system to banks and to other companies here in Los Angeles.
Did she do
That was her
as
specialty.
on a consulting basis? Or
First, she works in NCR, National Cash Register, if you're old enough to remember them.
Yes.
They were one of the first in the computer. Yes. They had a facility in El Segundo there. And that's where she started. She worked in TRW too. And eventually, she went into consulting, private consulting. Yeah. So that was our life. And then she stopped working in 2000 when we had a tragedy with my son. And then she took over conducting, managing the foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, could you, to go back into those Technion years,
Yeah.
was it during that time that you had your first exposure to computers?
It wasn't computer. The computer class was introduced in my last year of college. I didn't take it. It was a choice. Some of my friends took it. We knew the computer is something, the ongoing, the future, but I wasn't interested. What I was interested in was logic, Boolean logic, and that was taught by, but Yoeli. It was a good class, minimizing relay networks. And I'm saying relay network, not switching devices, because we didn't have transistor. Yeah, so it was minimizing the number of relays to get a certain Boolean function implemented. Yeah, that was the essence of the class, and I loved it because it has a combination of mathematics and real life. You get the result in the mathematics, and it translates into a minimal network of relay. Yeah.
Was that also your exposure to Claude Shannon in that class?
Yes and no, because I don't think his name came up. His name, I didn't know his name until later.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did your thinking develop as your time at the Technion was coming to a close about what you were going to do next?
Yeah, I remember an interview that I had with the dean. He asked me, "What are you going to do?" And I wanted him to write for me a recommendation. I applied for Chicago and I believe MIT and others. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do network synthesis. He said, okay. He said, it's not the hottest thing in science, even then in 1960, but it's a nice intellectual exercise. I said, yes, that's what I want to do. So he wrote for me a recommendation, and that's what it is really what I wanted to do. So that was the kind of intellectual exercise which I found to be intriguing. I can consider. Well, I applied to several universities here, and I believe I was accepted to one or two, but I found out that the tuition would be prohibited for me. The one where I did get accepted, and it has a possibilities, was Brooklyn Poly. Polytechnic of Brooklyn. Brooklyn Poly, it was the top school at that time for microwave and other communication technology. And I was accepted there with the provision that I'll get a job in NYU, because I had a friend of a friend of a relative who worked in NYU dental school, and my relative arranged for me to have a stipend or to be an assistant in the School of Dentistry in NYU. And on that basis, I went to America. So here we go to America, waking up in Harlem, not knowing English. No one could understand me because I talk English the way I speak now, and I couldn't understand what the bartender says. It was a black accent, and we didn't communicate. So, but eventually, I found out that the tuition will be insufficient. Namely, my job at NYU will not cover the tuition in Brooklyn Poly. Okay. And we rented a flat in Brooklyn, and eventually my relative here found out that they have an evening school in Newark College of Engineering. That was today, it's the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Right.
Yeah. But it was in Newark, so we could move and live in Newark, and instead of Brooklyn, which was cheaper, and they have an evening school, which means I could work in the daytime, and my wife could work. Okay, so that was quite a relief.
And what were you doing how were you addressing the language issue?
The language, well, I could communicate not with the bartender, but I communicate with my boss.
Okay.
That was no problem.
Okay.
The bartender still remained a problem for me. Okay. So I worked in NYU, in the School of Dentistry, and at the same time I did my master's in Newark College of Engineering, and I did my thesis on my work.
Okay.
We measured the blood flow in the cat tooth.
Okay.
It was very important to measure it at the time, because the volume in the tooth remained the same. So how do you measure the blood flow? There's no expansion and contraction that you can measure. I had to figure out tricky ways of measuring the blood flow in terms of the velocity of the blood inside the cat tooth. Okay. And we wrote papers on that. The first time I heard about writing a paper, my first paper was on the cat tooth. And
And you had developed an electronics system?
I developed the electronics and the ideas of measuring, how to measure velocity of blood. Yeah. So that was a successful thing. We published 2 papers on that. And I learned what it means to write a paper. And I didn't understand why my boss is working so hard to publish a paper. What's the big thing about the paper? I said, I mean, come on, you're already associate professor. What do you need a paper for? She said, no, we must publish it. Why? We got the results, right? We managed to find out the oscillation. And I learned the first time what academia is all about. Yeah, and after that, that was in NYU. I wrote my master thesis. My wife at the same time were also going to Newark College of Engineering. She wrote her thesis on microwave antennas. And that's what she wrote for, and got her master's. Later on, she got a master's. And she got a job also in microwave antennas. That's another story. But that's also, it's it's only for people who come from Israel can tell it. She was interviewed and they asked her, what are you doing? She said, no, I'm a mechanical engineer, I learned that. And what are you doing? So they told her we are putting microwave antennas from the west coast to the east coast, and so that we can have a communication, and we direct the beam in the correct way. And that way she said, so why don't you do it the right way? She asked her. She said, what is the right way? You arrange antenna, you do the beam, you arrange by phase transition. We make sure that the beam goes in the right direction electronically. So they said, you're hired, but tell us how to do it. She didn't know what she's talking about. She just thought that this is the way to do it because that's the way we learn how to do it. But she had the gut to tell me, why don't you do it the right way? She wouldn't do it now, later in her life. Or maybe she would. But
So what was your next step after?
The next step was getting a job in RCA laboratory.
How did that connection come about?
The connection to that came, let me see. How did I hear about RCA laboratories? I forgot how I heard about them. They had a program which they attract good engineers and allow them to do their thesis together with the research in the laboratory. I remember the interview that I had. Yeah. How I heard about them, I don't know. Evidently, I heard about the program. And that fascinated me, but it was attractive to me because it would allow me to do my PhD while I'm working in daytime. And that, I remember the interview. They interviewed me and said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do a new digital devices that will switch fast and will be cheaper and all this. I said, well, have any idea? He said, yes, I heard that you can do it with tunnel diodes. I said, how do you do it? You have a tunnel diode and you have this and you make it switch from here to there. You're hired. Because I was excited to do it, you know. Once you are excited in an interview, they sense it, and it was very easy to get in. It was a good environment.
This is the laboratory in Princeton.
It was RCA Laboratories in David Sarnoff Research Laboratory in Princeton, New Jersey. And we were competing there with IBM and Fairchild Camera and Bell Lab on what? On finding new devices for computer. We all understood that computers is the way of the future. However, computers are too cumbersome, too big, too noisy, too expensive, right? Too slow. Okay. There ought to be a new physical principle by which computer logic and computer memories, specifically computer memories, should be able to be built and serve on a computer. So we all worked on new devices. Some people worked on photochromic memories. Some people worked on semiconductors. We brushed them off. It will never work. And some people worked on superconductivity. Yeah, a cryotron, as you measure, yes, as you mentioned. And I worked on superconducting film, so as to store circulating currents inside the thin film superconductor, have a grid of X wires, Y wires, and select the direction of the spinning whirl. And that's how we have a 1 and 0, and we be cheap and fast than everybody else. Well, it worked very well in theory, and it did actually in practice too. We built some nice devices, and however, semiconductors took over. They managed to wipe us all the contenders for computer memories. But when did they pass out? Not much later. They took over in the 1968 or so. Yeah, and I'm talking about 1965. We were still in RCA laboratory. At that time, I wanted to become rich. I'm already a PhD. I got my PhD in Brooklyn Poly. Oh, that's something else. But then another story where my wife was in the hospital with my son, and I had an uncle and his wife were academicians, and they told me, where are you getting your PhD? I said, in Newark College of Engineering. He said, it's not a good school. I said, who cares about the school? He said, you'll be surprised. Yeah, the name of your school is make it or quit. I didn't quite believe that this is the case, but I switched. At the last year of my PhD program, 63 or 64, I applied for Newark College back to Brooklyn Poly and said, would you accept me as a student? And they said, yes, if you want to take the classes and take the exams and all that. I said, no way. I was chutzpah at the time too. If you want me as a student, you let me take the exam without any class. Okay? So they said, what can you offer us? I said, yeah, I can offer you a lot because I have facilities in RCA laboratories that you wouldn't dream having here in your facilities. Okay? That's something you should consider. But they said, no one passed the exam without taking that. I said, they give me a chance. So I did pass the exam, both the written and the oral, in flying colors again, except I didn't know what flying colors are. I had to ask my neighbor what the flying color is. Okay, so I did pass that, and it was a good move because they really had much better reputation, but I didn't learn anything from them. Okay. I learned everything in my job, on the job. Okay. And I had to teach my advisor what I'm doing. I saw him only twice. Wow. But he was learning. Yeah, so I didn't learn from them. but I got there to their facilities, and I think I took one class. No, I didn't take a single class. No.
And so did you have a thought of staying at RCA Labs, or you really
No.
wanted
In
to
the
change?
last year already, I thought that I accomplished the first part of but my idea was to get my PhD, to become a millionaire, and go back to Israel. Okay, I accomplished the first part, and I was stuck on the second one. So it's about a time for me to accomplish the second one. I'm still working on it, by the way, but and then go to Israel. So here I am. Last year of my PhD program, I came to my boss and said, I want a raise because I'm worth more in the market. He said, yes, but you have a good work, you have a good environment, you enjoy it. I said, yes, it's true, but I have to accomplish my second phase now. So I left, I left RCA, and I went to a place which I thought will make me rich, and this was Electronic Memories here in El Segundo, in California, and in Hawthorne, California, right here. And they offered me stock options, something new for me. I'm going to own stocks, you know. Stock options, and a nice director of advanced memories. And so I went to California. I came here in 1966, I believe. Yeah, I came to California. I worked in this electronic memories. My wife started working at TRW. We had already 2 kids. They were born in Princeton, New Jersey, and I worked on something totally different, not on superconductivity. I worked on plated wire memories. Okay, it was a contender to core memories. Instead of threading wires through donuts, you plate magnetic material on top of the wire.
Okay.
So it's already threaded.
Oh, I see.
And then you crisscross them. In fact, 3 years I worked on that, frustrated, because it involved a combination of chemistry, electronic, magnetic, and administration. I was frustrated. My wife said I came home and played on the piano with such anger that she knew I'm unhappy. Eventually, after 3 years, we were barely putting some product on the market, but it found only application in the military, where they wanted to have sustainability against high radiation.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Semiconductor at that time were vulnerable.
Right.
And so that was a small market. And essentially, I was told, find another job.
By electronic
By
memories?
electronic memories, yes. Yes.
Wow.
We don't have,
Yeah.
we are going to phase out this line of research.
They also had other
They had
avenues?
semiconductors.
Okay.
Yeah. And in the beginning, semiconductors. And I was told, find another job. Yeah. Okay, I found another job. But I wasn't worried so much. You know why? Because at that time, academia looked up to industry. Industry was the place where all the innovation were made. The laser and the transistor, all these innovations were made in industry. Nothing was accomplished in universities, and they knew it. So I felt like I'm privileged, and I'm dictating my terms. And I wanted to move to get to a university. My wife said, you belong in university, not in industry. She saw how frustrated I was. Okay, and we had a friend of a friend who knew somebody at UCLA, and I gave them a call. He said, yes, come down, we may have a slot. I wasn't exactly sure what a slot is, but I could imagine. Okay, I came and interviewed, and he said, yeah, we might have something for you. And I went to USC, and I wanted to work there. They asked me, what do you want to work on? I said, I want to do software engineering. Why software? I said, software is something that is intellectually exciting, right? You put on software some of your thoughts, and you combine them together, and you get the operating system which works better than anybody else. And so the dean asked me, are you crazy? Have you ever programmed in your life? I said, yes, Fortran. He said, and you want to teach software? I said, I have people here that 20 years are doing and coding, and you're going to tell me that I should hire you, and to teach software? I said, yes. He said, on what basis? I said, I'm successful wherever I go. I said, I was a chutzpah. I don't know where I got the arrogance at that time. But perhaps because I was successful. Okay? So he threw me out of his office. Okay? And I'm very happy that he did. Because I didn't go to software. Eventually I went to UCLA, I got into the laboratory there, and I started working on a contract of my friend. It wasn't.
Who was that?
Jerry Estrel.
Okay.
Jerry
right.
Estrel, was one of the first pioneer of computer systems. He also was the one who built the Golem computer in the Weizmann Institute.
Of course.
The first computer in Israel.
He and his wife, right?
He and his wife, yeah.
Yeah.
His wife, Thelma, right. So they were both at UCLA, and he was managing the laboratories, and the computer science department was just formed at that time. It didn't even exist at the time. Well, I was hired by UCLA. This is where my college made a difference. See, I was not even interviewed. At that time, they didn't interview candidates; they just brought them in. So I was sort of making acquaintances with members of faculty who sized me rather than interview me. Okay, so they sized me up and down and say, "Where from? Brooklyn Poly? Oh yeah, I heard about it." See, had I said New Jersey, I wouldn't have gotten in. So Kleinrock, for example, Leonard Kleinrock was one of the people who sized me up and said, yeah, you can come in. And so forth. I got into teaching computer memories because I had experience with the hardware. They wanted somebody to teach both APL, I believe was the language, yes, and computer memories. I taught that. And eventually I was hired by a different department, not computer science, by a department called system engineering, or engineering systems. Yes, it was a collection, interdisciplinary collection of people who were outcast in other fields. But the Dean Bolter, who was believed in interdisciplinary, so they had this mixture of people. Some taught design, some taught operation research, some taught control theory. So I had to teach all the nitty-gritty courses of engineering, okay? From control theory to operation research. Okay? Plus, I taught a course in decision theory, and that changed my direction. It was as part of my teaching engineering statistics, I chose statistical decision theory. So I read all the classics in statistical decision theory, from Savage to Ferguson, Rafer, all the great people in decision theory. And that gave me acquaintances or familiarity with probability and decision making.
Okay.
And so at that time, computer science department was established, and I was hired back to computer science to teach computer science, whatever they asked me to. And I taught courses in pattern recognition and in AI. AI at that time meant whatever you put into it, whatever you decide to teach. And at that time, AI was game playing, chess, checkers. Okay, so I got into that in computer science, and I taught there also decision theory as part of my AI class, because I thought to make decision is the greatest thing that a machine can do. Okay.
May I ask you one quick question
Go ahead,
about
please.
that? Was there a connection between the probability theory that's in decision theory and what you were doing with pattern recognition, or were those distinct?
We are distinct.
Okay.
The pattern recognition that I did was a totally different endeavor. I was interested in image coding, and at that time, sending images parsimoniously with the least code, with the smallest code, was the hardest thing in many areas for certain people. So I worked on image compression, sending images with the least amount of information. So we worked on transform theory, Fourier transform, Hadamard transform, Walsh transform, and that was my contribution at that time. And pattern recognition too. So that was my area of interest. Still with the idea that everything comes to AI. Because my dream of dreams was, obviously everything is eventually going to be done by computer. So we must be ready to have associative memory, to have a fast understanding of images, to have, that was only a dream. And I worked on the components toward that dream. So that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Please ask me more, because I don't know if I'm going on.
No, this is wonderful. I hesitate to interrupt, but
No, please interrupt me more.
Okay. I wanted to know, I wanted to know about how you first got acquainted with artificial intelligence and how that, connection deepened for you. Was it at UCLA that you really began this
UCLA,
reading?
yes.
Okay, yeah.
At UCLA, on my own, I would say, because we did not have any group working on artificial intelligence. But for me, it was a driving force. So I got into bits and pieces that I knew should be part of the eventual super robot. Should have perception, it should have reasoning, and it should have search. All these were parts on which I tried to work. Okay. So in 1976, I went on sabbatical to the Weizmann Institute, and there I worked still on pattern recognition and on coding, on minimal coding, yeah.
Okay.
But there I got interested in something, in a problem. If you really want to minimize computation, and you're willing to sacrifice quality, what is the trade-off curve? So suppose you allow 5% of your answers to be wrong. Do you get an exponential amount of computation saving? or just 5%. Okay? That triggered me because I thought that if you are, there's a threshold here. That the reasons why we get stuck on computation is because we insist on yes and no answer. If we're only willing to give up 1%, we'll get an exponential gain in memory size and in computation speed. That was an idea that drove me crazy at that time. So I worked on that trade-off for maybe 3 years on that. And I published a few papers on that. It turns out you don't get, it's not a phase transition.
Got it.
Okay?
Right. Okay.
But that led me into the trade-off between error and computation. And I got interested in the philosophy of science, where this trade-off is everywhere, right? Do we insist on a correct hypothesis, or we allow certain amount of spiel, or allowing, or fudginess? And I got into philosophy of science at that point. And then when I came back from sabbatical, I started working on games, on game playing. Why? Because that trade-off also plays a role in game theory. You know, you look at the board position and you assess perceptually how good the board position is. That's called the static evaluation function. Then you look forward to a certain number of steps ahead until you get to a certain horizon. You attribute the evaluation function to the nodes in the horizons, and you roll them back, and then you decide which is the best move to take. Okay. That is a trade-off between search and quality of perception. So that was wonderful arena, or it's wonderful playground for this trade-off. Today we can say one is system 1 of Kahneman and one is system 2. System 1 is what you immediately see, instinctively see, you know, and it's obvious and self-evident to you. And the other one requires search, reasoning, contemplation, planning, and that is a search mode. At that time we didn't have a theory, but the metaphor, but I was intrigued by the trade-off between the two. And I got few nice results in game theory, okay, because I was mathematically oriented. So I asked the question of how good should the heuristic be in order to gain that much in search. You know? And there is a question that has to do with the trade-off between the two. So I got some into game theory. At that time it was the hot things in AI, and which brings us already to the 1979, 1980, no, before that, 1978. Yeah, 3 years I worked on search theory. I wrote the book Heuristics, my first book. Any questions about?
Yes, because I was thinking about the limits, the connection between, the sort of probabilities and statistics that you were seeing in decision theory, and then when you're doing this work on game playing and the limits of search. Are the limits of search a form of uncertainty?
I didn't understand. I don't understand the question.
I'm probably saying it in an incoherent way,
maybe,
but it's bear with me. It's that when you're in game theory and in game playing, when you are dealing with these trade-offs about how thorough of a search to do, does that relate to dealing with uncertainty?
Yes, because we don't know in advance what we are going to find in the horizon, right? So I had a paper, for instance, with Richard Karp, okay, about the trade-off, or how far you have to search if you have a random cost on the edges of a tree. Okay? So you don't know the cost of a tree ahead of time. Okay? So you have to do, the question is, what is the minimal depth you have to go through before you are, whether it converges to a certain limit. And we found it nice convergence properties. Okay? On a random, here randomness comes in. You don't know ahead of time the cost on the edges. Okay? Right. You find them as you go along. Yes. So that was one place where randomness came in. The other place was when you search a game tree, you don't know the values of the root nodes, or the horizon nodes. You don't know their values. Assuming that they're random. Okay, let's assume they're random. What can you say about your best move? Okay, there's an answer to that. Okay, it converges to a value. Okay, Bing, another paper. And it's not for me, not a paper. It's just a surprise result. It has a value, which I could compute in advance with the average number of nodes you have to search in a optimally, plus in practical algorithms such as the alpha beta. Right. Yeah. So I could find the branching factor of the alpha beta algorithm, and you can prove it's optimal. It means there's no algorithm that can do better. Okay? That was a nice result. I was very proud. Even Dan Knuth was surprised by the result.
You know, right as your book on heuristics is coming out, you know, embodying these results that you had, this is the time when this era of knowledge-based systems and expert systems is really starting on the rise. How did you start to think about or view the development of expert systems?
Yeah, expert systems start coming out in the late 1970s with Dendrel and I forgot the name already.
Myson?
Huh?
Myson?
Myson and Prospector.
Right.
Yeah. And they presented to me again the issue of dealing with uncertainty. Because it turns out that managing uncertainty was one of the obstacles for those systems. Okay? They started with logic rules, and it worked well as long as you had the rules, but every rule has exceptions. And the problem was how you deal with exceptions. And there were, at that time, in the beginning of the 1980s, there were a lot of theories about how we should deal with uncertainty. One thing was clear, that probability is off the table. Because probability had a bad reputation, it needs exponential memory and exponential time. So it ran into an ill-reputable period. But the practicing system experts, okay, were needed to feed the rules with some degree of certainty to account for the exceptions. And there were a lot of theories of, so as I say, it was clear that we AI people must invent a new way of dealing with uncertainty. Probability is off, which means the landscape is ready for us to invent a new calculus of uncertainty. That was the agreed upon consensus among all workers. Because if probability off, what remains?
Right.
So Zadeh had his fuzzy logic, and Dempster and Schaefer had their belief functions, calculus, and there were certainty factors which were put on the Meisen rules.
Right.
Yeah, but they couldn't combine well. None of them met the requirement. What was the requirement? Two requirements. One, computational tractability, and the other was intuition. You couldn't defy intuition. Yeah, if I tell you that smoke is an evidence for fire, and fire normally creates smoke, you have to say something about if you see smoke, okay? And not run into a feedback loop which runs away and suddenly you start calling the fire department on the basis of a hint that you might have a smoke there. So the two rules will interact and amplify each other for no reason. So that's one typical example where the certainty factors will not work.
Okay.
And also if you had a explain away, they couldn't deal with explain away. Like, what is explain away? If I tell you that, okay, if I have a smoke, it must be it is fire. But if somebody tells me, no, I had a cigarette, I lighted the cigarette, you should explain away the smoke or the alarm and take away certainty from the fire, right? So you explain away the reason for the evidence that you have, you take it away from another reason. And that could not work well because it's non-monotonic, it doesn't work well with the certainty factor. So this kind of pattern of intuition that you expect to see in expert system, and it didn't work out well. So when I heard about these difficulties, for me it was very clear. This explain away and the feedback loop and all this are done very well in Bayesian statistics. We do it all the time. We never get into a runaway between smoke and fire, fire and smoke. No, we do it well. So everything, if we do it correctly, according to Bayes' rule, we are protected from, say, idiosyncratic violation of our intuition. So let's go back to Bayes' rule. The problem was computational complexity. Okay? If you go and do it by the table, by ordinary, standard or conservative traditional probability theory, you have to have a table, exponentially large table of probabilities for all possible combination of instantiation of the variables. And you have n variables, you have already exponentially large number of memory. It cannot be done. So what we do, I looked into how Bayesian people do it, and they do it using the parsimony that comes about by conditional independencies. Not every variable is relevant to every problem. Some are declared irrelevant if you know other variables. So if you know that, how do I say, if you know that the sprinkler is on, you don't have to worry about what the weather is to know that your grass will be wet. Okay? The sprinkler being on shields the past from the future, given the present. That's called a Markov property. And it's captured nicely in conditional independence in probability theory. So that was the secret, conditional independence. Let's find out the logic of conditional independence, and let's find out how we represent and we take advantage of that. And then that gave rise to Bayesian network. But before that, I had a paper 5 years earlier about belief propagation. Belief propagation was a notion that I saw in Rumelhart's paper. He was a cognitive psychologist in UC San Diego. Yes, he was really the father of neural network. And he speculated how children can read so fast. It's unbelievable.
Right.
Okay? It must be a combination of a variety of processors. Some are syntactic level, some are semantic level, some are perception level. So all of them are working together, passing information from each other, top down and bottom up. Right? Sometimes you see a semantics of the story allows you to disambiguate uncertainty in the shape of the letter.
Right.
Okay? And sometimes the other way around. The shape of the letter allows you to disambiguate the story. Okay? So they are working, they're shaking hands and working top and down, bottom up. So it must be doing some handshaking, passing belief asynchronously, because there's no supervisor there. Right? They are just must be collection of neural entities that passing information to each other, and you get to have the right word. It's a Volkswagen or it's a cat. Yeah? So Rumelhart, he didn't go as deep as certainty factors or probabilities, but he had the idea of handshaking and top and down belief propagation. Okay. So I said that must be doable in traditional probability theory too. I just believed in that. I said, it's impossible. I don't know where I got the strong conviction that it must be true in the way we perceive and process probabilities or uncertainties. So I took down, I did what my father probably do. If you have a hard problem, you simplify it. So I said, is there any structure for which the belief propagation will work? I found out, yes, a tree. If you have a tree, which means every node, every concept, every variable has only one parent. Okay? Mm-hmm. Then I found out that you can perform asynchronous belief propagation and guarantee that after all the messages are passing through, eventually the network relaxes to the true value. What is true value? What you would have gotten had you done it by traditional probability.
Using
Okay?
the tables.
Using tables, exponentially large table. So we have a ground truth, okay? And we have here a system that works in a crazy way. A variable wakes up, sends messages to its neighbor, go to sleep. Everyone wakes up whenever you wake him up. Okay? Send the message and go to sleep. If you want to do it by a supervisor in a well-defined way, you could go ahead. But it's also going to work asynchronously. Okay? Where the waking up is determined by either external stimulus, hey, we got to make a decision, or by spontaneously, unsupervised. So that was the idea for belief propagation in trees. In 1980, I published this paper, and I had to call it a reverent Bayes on inference engine, because I had to master all the respectability that I could for repairing the ill-reputed status of probability theory. And well, it eventually developed into a polytree, where every node has several parents, but you don't have any loops. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then in 1985, I found a way of doing it for general networks. Okay? And at that time, then I published a paper saying Bayesian network. I coined the name, and I proposed it as a framework or a structure, a cognitive structure for belief system. And everybody was excited and started working on loopy network. Yeah. There were many, many schemes competing with each other of how to deal with networks with loops. Darwish had one, iterative propagation, and but the winner was a totally different scheme. I proposed it in my book as a homework, and I didn't think it's worth more than a homework, It's an approximation method. Ignore the loops.
Right.
And do things by handshaking as if you had a poly tree. Okay? And that took over. Because it turns out that not only it gave the correct result, it also not only it gave a good approximation, in many times it gave the correct result. It seemed like the propagation around the loop get tired eventually and dies down. Whereas the propagation by polytree remain substantive. So that took over because it allows people to program belief network easily. All you have to tell each node how to react, and you don't have to supervise their awakening. So in terms of programming, it was a breakthrough. All you have to specify was how each node reacts with its neighbors. The rest goes on automatically.
I wanted to ask you two questions.
Yeah.
One was if you could help me better understand why probabilities and Bayesian probability theory was so much off the table in the artificial intelligence community before you started to bring it back in. I guess I don't understand. It seems more than just, it's computationally very difficult. It seemed that there was like a philosophical or
no, it wasn't. It wasn't
opposition to it. No.
No. If you do it by textbook methods, it really looks undoable.
Okay.
Just imagine, for every possible combination of events in the world, somebody has to give the probability of that combination realizing.
Right.
There's no way to infer one combination from another one. They have to sum to one. Okay, that's the only constraint that you have. What else? Then you have marginalization. Namely, if you don't see some of them, fine. So you can go from a full specification to partial specification, but you cannot go the other way around. Mm-hmm. Okay? So you have to have this table. And if you go by the textbook, where this is the semantics of a probability statement, okay, you have to specify all those exceptions. And you just don't have the time to interact with an expert and ask for all possible exceptions and attribute to them probabilities.
Right.
The elicitation time will be horrendous. And then the computational time. And imagine now that you find an evidence. Okay, you find there's a smoke someplace. Okay, to compute the probability of fire given smoke, you have to start summing all these tables. It's undoable. Both computation, memory, and elicitation time.
Okay. And Bayesian networks, which you explained that you could show were equivalent to doing the probability theory, in this kind of traditional mode. I guess forgive me, but I am. Can you help me understand how the Bayesian networks escapes from that trap?
That's a very good question. That's very important. It's not that it escapes. It so happens in our communications, in our real life, we make many assumptions. Okay. We know, for instance, that the color of my uncle's eyes okay, is not relevant if I'm trying to find out whether I will get COVID. Right? It's a variable which is not related to my question. But I know some variables which are relevant to my problem. And those are small number of relevant, we call them Markov blanket. Okay, they shield, that's all you need to know if you want to get a decision on a particular question. So if I'm worried about fire in my house, all I have to know is whether a neighbor smelled smoke, or if some ideas, some evidence which is related to fire in my house. I don't need to know the color of eyes of my uncle.
Oh, I see. So this is much in the way that, heuristics, kind of truncate the sort of search that you need to do. In this case, it's these assumptions about relevancy that curtails the
We make
network.
many assumptions of irrelevancies in our life. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to communicate.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Because then if I ask you a question about fire, you start asking me a question about my uncle.
Right.
Okay? We were never going to communicate. We communicate only because we share the assumptions about things which are relevant and things which are irrelevant. Okay? So let's capture that the benefit of irrelevance. So many things are irrelevant when we are dealing with a task. Okay? Let's capture it in a certain computational object. What is a computational object? A network. Okay? In a graph, you also have neighbors and far away neighbors or pseudo neighbors. Okay? And you can tell who is shielding whom. So there must be a relationship between probability and graphs. Right? Must be! Because I just talked to you about neighbors, relevance, all this. Okay? And you tuned to me, you understood me. Okay? So there must be a relationship between graph and probabilities. What is the relationship? Well, I was lucky to have a visitor here, academic visitors, Zarya Paz from the Technion in 1985, I believe. Yes. And we asked the question, what is the relationship between graph theory and probabilities? They seem to be totally unrelated, right? Well, it turns out that conditional independence in probabilities obeys similar axioms to graph. So we totally redefined what graph is. Graph, instead of being defined by adjacency, we define it by interception. Who intercept which path between two nodes? Okay? There is a set of nodes which intercept all paths between node X and node Y.
Right.
Okay? So let's define the axiomatic system of interception. Okay? It turns out that the axioms of interception in graph are identical to the axiom of conditional independency in probability theory. Wow! This is a philosophical handshaking between two seemingly unrelated topics, probability and graphs.
Wow. And that
was called, by the way, it's called graphoids, the theory of graphoids. You can look it up in Wikipedia. I had a student write up that.
Oh, good. Then it will be reliable.
Yeah.
Well, so as you're coming out with these, really, fascinating results about, Bayesian networks, and you're publishing these papers, what is the reaction of people to this work? That's one question. Another is, when do people start to build systems that incorporate your results?
the reaction in the uncertainty management area or circles wasn't ecstatic because everybody had an ego invested already in a different kind of uncertainty management system. Okay. So they looked at it and they said, yes, that's one way of doing it. It's another way. And it dies there. But the people who are actually interested in building systems, and I think the first system was in Denmark, Huygens, expert system built on a Bayesian network, right? They appreciated what's going on. And then Microsoft started a research group with Heckerman and Eric Horowitz. And they started building systems for diagnosing software. And they saw that they get all the mileage from Bayesian network. You get a different diagnosis and predictions are different things that they could handle in the same system. And most important feature was reconfigurability. The example is a car engine. You diagnose a car. Okay? So you build an extra system for diagnosing car troubles. The model change. They have a different battery, okay, or different oil pump. Okay? The rest of the system stays intact. Only the things which are relevant to the oil pump change. Okay? So, which means you can take the software that you built for the previous model, reuse it for the next model. All you need to change is the things which are related to the oil pump. Big deal. It's minor local change, and the system works again. According to Heckerman, that was the feature that made Microsoft go into Bayesian network in their diagnosis system. Okay. Reconfigurability. And why? Now you can ask yourself, why was Bayesian network so good in reconfigurability and other systems not? Because we didn't know it at the time. All the Bayesian systems were the Bayesian network system were designed with causality in mind, and we didn't know it. Which means always the parents of a node were the causes of the node. We never went and put the evidence on top and the hypothesis in the bottom. It came natural, right? We thought it's just convenient. No, it's philosophically very deep. Only when you go from cause to effect, you have this invariance. That you can change some component and the other one remains unaltered, invariant.
Well, I mean, that's before we dive into causality, I just wanted to ask, one thing I wanted to ask was one about funding. You know, how were you funding your work? And the other is about the sort of communities, professional communities that were important to you in this time. The ACM, the AAAI, if you could speak to those two.
Okay, funding. I remember that my funding depended on finding a good Samaritan among the officers of either Army Research Institute or the Navy or NSF. Without finding those, I would call them enlightened officers, okay? I wouldn't have been funded. Okay? But one or two of them, said that's the way to go. And he pushed me and he supported me. Small grant, always small grant. I never got to what you see today with the data science. Okay, which is I'll tell you what I call them. It's erecting Gothic cathedrals to an hand-carved god. Okay. Put it in, please. Don't take it out.
No. That is a very that is a great quote.
Okay, so, but I will never splurging in money. But I always had a good Samaritan guardian angel among the NSF officers and all the Navy. Navy has been very good to me. NRO. Naval Research Office? No. ONR. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about
Go back
community a bit.
The community in 1985. Okay. The practitioner received very well, and I told you why. Reconfiguration, funding. I was always on with a good guardian angel, and you asked me about the rest of the AI community.
Yeah,
that's important.
Or computing community. Yeah.
There was some reception, and in areas such as default logic, non-monotonic logic, because what we did here in comparability has some projection on non-monotonic logic, which is also the idea of dealing with exception. Okay? Birds fly, but penguin is a bird, it doesn't fly. Okay, so we have exception. We had some projection over there, and people took it seriously. Also, people took seriously there the idea that you cannot combine causal rule with evidential rule and hope to get correct results without paying attention to them. So that also became part of the non-monotonic logic, whereas I saw resonance. Yeah, well, I get that was later, not in Bayesian Networks thing. Where else can you find it in computer science?
Yeah.
Software system people didn't care. No, you don't, unless you do diagnosis. Troubleshooting, yeah.
Well, let's turn then to let me see. I'm just scanning my notes here.
Oh, we still have drink here.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to talk about your work with graduate students and how that has been in the development of in your work. If you could just talk about that aspect of your efforts.
We are still in the Bayesian Network period, right?
Yeah.
I had good students, I must say. I have very good students. Some of them pushed me into doing things that I wouldn't have done myself. For instance, going from tree to polytree was an idea of Kim, my student Jin Kim, who is a Korean, who went back to Korea. And he pushed me and said, there is a conference in Germany, and let's present a paper. And he derived all the equations for the polytree. And if it wasn't for him, I was just wouldn't have done it. Yeah. And who else? Well, I did the work, a lot of work on constraint satisfaction, which I didn't mention here, was done with my former student Rina Dekter, who, by the way, she's a chair of Ichkai, which takes place this week in Vienna. Okay. So she was adapting some of the ideas of graph-based reasoning to constraint satisfaction problem. Satisfiability, graph coloring, that kind of problem. Probability did not get, in the beginning, did not play a major role in constraint satisfaction unless you later on have soft constraint. Okay? Two teachers cannot teach in the same subject unless you make an exception. So far. But, okay, so she took the graph-based reasoning system and software and algorithm and apply them to constraint satisfaction problem. Find things like tree width. And then she went back and brought ideas from constraint satisfaction into Bayesian network. Yeah. So that is a body of work which I wouldn't have done myself if it wasn't for her. My students, Geffner, took seriously the work on default logic, non-monotonic logic, and developed a system. And also he took seriously the work on automatic discovery of heuristic, applied it to planning. And all this, developed because I had good students.
Right.
They had initiative and they took it to, and many of them told me, you don't know anything about AI. And they were right. I didn't know anything from default logic until Geffner told me, this is where the hot stuff is. This is where the action is. Okay. So they moved me into different areas, yes, because of their interest in whatever they met in conferences and among their peers. Right. Yeah.
Well, I remember reading somewhere about how at one point during the development of your Bayesian network work, that there came a point where you explicitly kind of rejected a treatment of causality from it. You know, that the issue of causality came up and you kind of set it aside or something, and you thought that it wasn't a treatment of causality wasn't necessary, that you could handle everything with probabilities alone.
Yeah, I was so excited with the success of probability, with the fact that probability is keeping us, it's a guardian of coherence. It's a protector against paradoxes. Okay? That I thought that the human reasoning is completely describable by probabilities reasoning. Okay? And I then thought that the consideration of causality are just convenience. It's just a shorthand notation for pattern of probabilistic independency. So instead of saying this independent on that, given that and that and that, a pattern will just say this one causes that.
Right.
Okay. But it doesn't play any basic, essential role. I completely changed the mind. And in the preface to my book Causality, I apologize for being so stupid. At least I had the honesty to say so. Yeah.
Well, could you share with us how causality started to come back in for you? This is happening in the later 1980s, is that right?
Yeah, when my book on probabilistic reasoning came out in 1988, I already felt that I am an impostor because I didn't deal with causality. And I knew in my heart that the future is in causality. and what I thought was just a matter of convenience or of convention. It turns out to be a totally different dimension, orthogonal to probability, something without which we cannot have any reasoning at all. Which probability is the surface phenomena, the convenience stuff, not causality. Causality is the real stuff, is a real core of reasoning and intelligence. And probability are just surface phenomena. That's what I believe now. See? And I already felt that way in the 1988 when I finished my book Causality, my book on probabilistic reasoning, and Bayesian Networks took off and became a successful subfield. And I already felt that my heart is elsewhere.
Now, what was leading you to that? Was it your intuition, or what accounts for this like very deep shift?
Two different things, two influences. One was Hackerman analysis of why Microsoft is so successful with their Bayesian network and the idea of configurability. Configurability made me think that causality is not just a passing pattern, a surface pattern of independencies, but it is basic. It is connected with the idea of invariance. Invariance is everything in the world. Things remain the same even when the light differs. You should know that, right? We change the light, but my face, I'm the same person. Okay. So the idea of invariance, which is everywhere around us, which is the assumptions on which we communicate, by which we communicate, is in causality. It's not captured by the probabilities. Okay. So that was one philosophical shake-up. And then came another shake-up in 1991. I went to a conference in Uppsala, Sweden, and two things happened there. I had a dinner with Clive Granger, from Granger Causality, and we talked about causality, and after the second glass of wine, he confessed to him that Granger causality has nothing to do with causality, but since people took it, so he doesn't have the heart to tell them, look, it's not that. And the second one was a lecture by Peter Spiritus from Carnegie Mellon, a philosopher, with whom I worked before, but he showed an idea of how to do causal effect in graphs, by cutting off the edges from the parents to the son. This kind of surgery amounts to forcing externally the value of a variable, similar to randomized experiment. That he got from economist Strauss and Wald, two economists. They did an equation, but he translated it into graphs. Okay, and that gave me the idea that we can borrow everything that we have done with Bayesian network and apply it to a new field, which is totally orthogonal to the previous one. It's causal reasoning. And we can build a new calculus for action and for explanation, and we are on a new revolution. So that took place in 1993 when I published the paper on not Duke calculus yet, but it was on the backdoor criterion.
Okay. And so that's interesting to me because I thought that there was some sort of, that you were adding kind of an interpretation of causality onto Bayesian networks. But I see now that that was incorrect. What you're doing is taking all the kind of structure and methodology
and the algorithms
of the graphs and everything, and then using that methodology and applying it to causality.
which is a totally different world.
Okay.
It's the hard thing for people to understand that we are dealing now with a totally different world. It's a new school of thoughts. It's a new paradigm. You cannot go from probability to causality. No causes in, no causes out, which led to the ladder of causation, which leads to the three levels. Okay, you cannot get any answer to a query at level I unless you have information or assumptions from level I or higher.
Mm-hmm.
From probability, you cannot go to causal effect. From causal effect, you cannot go to explanation. Okay? Two separate layers. They don't mix. It's like oil in water and water.
But what accounts for, do you believe, the fact that you can, take this structure, for lack of a better word, that you used for probability, for Bayesian networks, and take, what accounts for the fact that that same structure is applicable for causality? Why does it work in both places?
Well, because conditional independence is still used in causal reasoning.
Okay.
We need it as a component. We still use conditional independence to figure out when you have a spurious correlation or when you don't have spurious correlation. Yes, but that's only one building block. It's only one brick in a scheme of things which are totally different in the sense that the question is different. What if you take aspirin? Would your headache go cure or not? It is not the same question as what if you see someone taking aspirin? Would it have it? So doing and seeing are two different worlds, a world apart, which means you cannot get doing from seeing.
I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's hard for people to understand how far apart the world of causality is from the world of observation, which probabilities is a guardian of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the cruxes of that is intervention, as you've...
Yeah, intervention is the level 2. It has to do with predicting the effect of interventions. Right.
And then another big one is the importance of counterfactuals, which is in a way like imagined interventions, is it not?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
That's the imagining part of our brain.
Well, so you start to have this big realization around 1993.
Yes.
Was it 1994 that you became professor emeritus?
In 1994, you're right. Or maybe 5.
Okay. So,
one of the two.
Well, I was just wondering how that affected what happened. Here you are, you're starting on this, huge new thing.
Oh, yeah.
That is very, treating causality is kind of a big thing from the history of philosophy and everything. And I wondered if that changed things for you.
I didn't think there is a cause-effect relationship between the two, but maybe, because I had more time.
Oh.
Suddenly, in 1995, I could teach what I want. I still have graduate students and my office. I had a cut in salary, but who cares? But I can do everything that I want without worrying and without teaching stuff I don't want to teach.
Right.
I taught things which I wanted to teach, and no committees, That was a nirvana. I was even telling our dean that we should hire new faculty on emeritus status and phase them into hard work slowly.
It's a great idea.
It gives them a chance to express themselves.
Really do something, and then they can get to work.
Yes. So yeah, it may have some connection.
Okay.
Because it gave me freedom, which I didn't have before.
Well, it was just that to ask you to to kind of challenge you to express for a general audience, some of the most important things that you would want them to understand about your work in causality, and also to the biggest misconceptions that you would like to disabuse people of about causality.
Okay. As you know, causality has been a misunderstood concept, or at least a puzzle, to many philosophers, from the time of Aristotle to the time of modern philosophers. And therefore this kind of disagreements has its traces and marks in many fields, going from economics to statistics to epidemiology. So depending on what school of thoughts people were trained on, they would like to understand causality in that narrow paradigm. So I currently have discussions, I would say disagreements, or perhaps even fights with many disciplines. Okay, going from economics to statistics and computer science, because computer science today is dominated by deep learning, data science, and data science is statistics on steroids. So which means that people understand what probability is, they know what prediction is, they go from data, one type of data to another type of data, and they live and die by the data. There is a limitation to that, which not everybody understand. I already mentioned a limitation that you have a hierarchy here, and going from correlation to causation, then from causation to explanation, or to imagination. It's hard for people, especially in machine learning, to grasp that wall, the limitation of one layer, where one layer ends and the other one begins. Why? Because of two things. Machine learning school of thought has two paradigms that they love, everybody loves. Number one, tabula rasa. I don't want to get any opinion. I don't want to get any preconceived knowledge. I want to derive everything by myself. Let the computer learn it. And you find the word learning overused, and that learn to learn, and learn to learn to learn, and learn everything we learn. Namely, I don't want to deal with it. Let the computer deal with it. So I do some tricks, and I hope the computer will learn it. So that's the tabula rasa handcuff. Okay. The other handcuff is, let's do it the way that the brain does it. So if it looks like neurons interacting, it's good. If it looks like knowledge coming from a rule system, it's bad, because it's man-made. Okay, it's not, the neurons don't act like that. You don't have rules in the neurons. You have interconnection, you have spikes, you have interactions, okay? But you don't have. So if it looks like the brain could be structured that way, it's good. We are at the basic. We are the basis of intelligence because we looked at the brain itself. So these two paradigms are very seductive. And I understand it. Everybody wants to do brain-like. Brain-like means intelligent-like. And that one, we don't want any opinion. We want to have tabula rasa and learn to learn to learn to learn. Now, there's limitation to that. We can prove today that you cannot do certain things by looking at data and data only. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of mathematical proof that you can look at people who take aspirin all day and people whether or not they have headache all day, and you cannot prove that the aspirin is what causes the headache. Maybe the other way around. The time sequence play a role, yeah. But if you just look at, you can take data all day long of ice cream sales and drowning accidents, and you find a correlation there, and you don't know what causes what. The drowning causes the ice cream sale, or the ice cream, and on and on. You can have a situation where you find that students who smoke get a better grade than students who don't smoke. But if you take into account their family income, then suddenly it's the other way around. Those who smoke do worse than those who don't smoke in every income category. And then you can take into account also perhaps age. Okay? Once you put age, then it reverses again. And those who smoke do better or do worse. So by introducing new variables, you get a different correlation. That's essentially a proof that data tells you nothing about cause and effect. Okay? There's even a better one, which I like to use. This is the Simpson paradox. Okay? You can find out that a certain drug is good for girls and good for boys, but worse for people. Okay? Good for men, I should say, and for women, and worse for people. And for people whose age, whose gender you don't know, are doing better. And that doesn't make sense, okay? And it's part of the correlation. It's part of the data. There's nothing in the data that will prevent you from making this stupid conclusion. What do? You have to deal with a new entity. It's called cause-effect relationship. So that's something which is not given in the education of data science courses, nor in the traditional statistical education. There's some of it in economics, but molested. Okay? Not done proper way. Okay? Epidemiology is a field which has made a transition. They understand the importance of reasoning with causality as separate science. Okay? Some social scientists also get to understand it. Okay? But unfortunately, statistics proper and data science, as we see today, do not teach this transition from data to the process that generated data. And this is what causal reasoning is all about. Okay. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I gave you a hint of what needs to be done. There are three levels of reasoning. One cannot stay within the lower one and expect to answer a question in the higher one. It's just mathematically undoable by proof, not by opinion. Okay. How to convince people that this is the case? You see, it's hard because people in data science are so entrenched in the belief that they can do things by learn that today they tell me we can learn how to incorporate causal constraints too. Okay? By just looking at data, doing certain things, moving from environment to environment, eventually we are going to get, we can program in, they call it inductive bias. Mysterious things. Inductive bias, which happens to help them in predicting better. Okay. For instance, if you have a preference for polynomial of lower degree over higher degree, then you can fit data better. You can predict better if you limit yourself, when you can, up to a certain noise. So you protect yourself from overfitting by what is called inductive bias. So they believe they can do the same trick with causality. But is the proof you cannot. And whatever you do, whatever you succeed, is because you made some assumption that we can mathematically explicate and do better once we know what assumptions we are looking for. So what can I tell to people like that? It's an educational tragedy.
And what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about your causality work?
About my work?
Yeah.
From machine learning circles, I don't think there is a misconception about my work as opposed to other people's works. Okay? It's only the difficulty of liberating yourself from the handcuffs of these two ingredients which I mentioned, tabula rasa and neuron-like. Okay. It sounds hard to accept opinion, expert opinion, to accept a model, an outside model, to guide your inference, because it's against the idea of machine learning. You don't want to sit down with an expert and receive a model from an expert. You want machine learning to learn it by itself. But my point is that even if you are learning the model by yourself, by a machine. Namely, that you do some what is called causal discovery. And there are methods of doing causal discovery. Okay? They are subject to a certain ambivalence. It means you don't have uniqueness. But you can discover a set of causes which is compatible with the data. Yeah, this is possible, a set of causal models. Okay? Even if you do that, if you do it purely by starting from scratch, okay, eventually you have to answer a question from a human user. And the question that the user asks are causal questions. So you have to know how to manipulate your discovered model and get the right answer. And the answer normally involves explanation. Okay? Why was my loan denied? Okay? Why do I have to go to this bureaucrats? So you have to explain it. Explanation is a causal process. You have to know how things are organized in the person's mind before you can give adequate explanation to. Okay? So there's no escape from studying causal reasoning, causal inference, causal network, okay, and incorporate them into machine learning. There is no escape there. Okay. I don't know if I was convincing to you.
Well,
So this is the thing which are harder for machine learning people to absorb.
what to you are some of the applications of your work with causal networks and causal reasoning? What are some of the achievements of it
Unbelievable.
that have really given you, confidence and more courage in the approach?
I look at all the obstacles that machine learning people are facing. We can solve them. I'll give you examples. How to deal with confounding is one of them, which are already solved for 2 decades already solved or more. Putting heterogeneous data sources together. You have experiment here, experiment there, experiment in Arkansas, and you want to combine them together, and you want to know how to combine them. They don't talk about experiments, okay? They talk about learning, okay? So you learn something in Arkansas, and then you learn something in Texas, and you want to put them together, the two things that you learn. Now they are in the form of 2 neural networks trained in 2 different environments, and you want to get a conclusion about Hawaii. Right? How can you do that? This is it's called transfer learning. It has been in existence as an obstacle, only as an obstacle, no solution. Okay, as an obstacle, as a wishful thinking thing since I think 2 generations. People have been talking. Okay. We have a solution to that. Okay. If you know the structure of the experiment in Arkansas and the one in Hawaii, you can put 2 together. We know how to do that. Okay, that's called fusion. Missing data. Okay. How do you deal with it? Okay, some sensors fade. They don't find. Okay, people lie on their questionnaire because rich people don't like to be regarded as rich people, and so forth. So how do you correct for missing data? We have a solution for that. We have a algorithm that will fill in the correct data and will answer correct question based on a model of what makes people lie or what makes the data, what makes the missingness realized. For the reason for missingness, okay? Name selection bias, okay? People are selected for experiment because of incentive they're getting. You get a lot of homeless people. If you measure things on a homeless, how can you generalize to the general population and get the answer for the population on which the drug will be eventually used? Okay? Neural net cannot do that. If you train it on homeless, okay, it's not going to work for the population at large. Okay? List all the obstacles that you find in the machine learning industry, and we have a solution for that. We haven't left any of them unturned. Plus, much more. I'm talking about robot social intelligence, in which a robot understands what it means to build trust with another robot and communicate in the level that you and I communicate. Okay, you trust me, I really care for you. Okay, I feel for you. Or have I lied to you before? I haven't, right? Therefore, trust me. Okay, and this is how people communicate, and this is what makes a team of robots play better soccer than a non-team of robots. Robots that don't communicate. Okay? So I'm talking about implementing social intelligence among robots. Okay. This is not doable without having a model of yourself, a model of the belief system of your conversant. Okay. And we have the model. So if you remove models from your training, you're not going to do that. Okay. Okay. And so I'm talking further. I want to algorithmize free will. Why not? Or consciousness. Okay. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. What is consciousness? That's a big mystery in philosophy, and all the people are fighting about. For me, consciousness is one thing. You have a blueprint of your software. That's not a total mapping of your software. That will defy Turing halting problem, right? No, just a blueprint. Okay. And that is what we mean by consciousness. So you know how much limitation of your belief, you know what you know and what you don't know to a certain extent. That is consciousness. Once you have consciousness, you can talk about free will, which is just a filter that tells you that a certain act were meant to be acted and others were not meant to be acted. They were performed nonchalantly or spontaneously or by instinct. So you have a filter which tells you which acts were deliberate. That is free will. It comes after effect, after you enact it. There is no free will, of course. One neuron drives the other. What one neuron does is only a product of what other neurons in the neighborhood activated to act. Okay? So there is no free will, but we have a very powerful and vivid sensation that I have the option of either touching my nose or not. Before I even touch it, I'm sure that I have the option, right? Which is stupid, which is not true. I don't have the option. Okay. So it is just a filter that tells you which act was done by deliberation and which act was done either by spontaneous motion or by being forced to do it. Now, so there's a tremendous horizon of application to having the philosophy of causal network drive our belief system.
I wanted to ask you about what you think are the greatest challenges or obstacles for causal networks, causal reasoning, in the pursuit of those very ambitious goals that you just mentioned. What are the big challenges in the way?
Funding, research. There are some research problems that we need to overcome. Those require research. Those require postdocs that we can fund, and that a person would spend a year or two quietly and grind those and bring those obstacles to a halt, to a solution. We are starving by the big data people. We are not getting the kind of attention, both in educational field and in training and in research. We need a center for causal reasoning, and it doesn't exist. Some pop up here and there, but they are not funded at 1/10% of what you see in the big data business. Not only, it works the other way around, because we are starved by their success. And I explained to you how.
Yeah.
In funding and educational. If I go today to the chancellor of my university and I said, I found a billionaire that wants to fund it, he will say, it's not data science. I want data science. That's where that action is. I'll have a hard time convincing him to change the culture in my university from where it is entrenched right now, which is the hype of data science, okay, and get into some real science. That's what I'm doing.
So it's a cultural challenge
It's a
at the end
cultural
of the
challenge,
day.
yeah. I'm facing here a cultural challenge. Believe me, it's much harder job than St. Paul had, going to Rome by himself, okay? A nice Jewish boy, going to change the entire culture of the empire, of the Roman Empire, okay? And he believes that he can do it because he saw the miracle with his own eye, right? But look, he had quite a challenge. Sometimes I feel like what he felt. Even worse, because, what is this to change one religion to another? Because we are after one thing, right? Be good to other people, that's all common. We are facing a much harder challenge because people have invested, especially the leaders, okay? They invested all their professional life in one paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Kuhn complains about it. Yes. You can't ask them to change it. They were trained to milk the most from that paradigm. Okay, they cannot change it. Don't ask them the impossible. Look at the young people. But if you let these gurus, okay, be in control of the education, you lost it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also, part of the cultural issue, I think, is some of the rhetorical grounds that people in machine learning and data science have taken, to retreat from these rhetorical grounds where you have people saying, machine learning is up there with the invention of fire. You've kind of staked out a rhetorical ground that it's hard to retreat from, or hard to accommodate, other perspectives or possibilities.
No, I didn't get that. I understand the rhetorical ground. The rhetorical tools are used very efficiently in preserving the paradigms.
Right.
Once you get entrenched in the vocabulary using any terminology, you can't get out of it. Okay. That I understand. But I didn't get the relation to the invention of fire.
Well, I was just saying some of the, maybe it's not rhetoric, but it's some of the positions that advocates for like a machine learning approach have staked out that will say something like the development of machine learning is up there in historical importance as with, hominids getting control of fire. That's a very strong place to be. Well, I'm not saying whether
part of the success of fire was that you could learn by imitation.
I wasn't saying that I wasn't arguing that was the case, just to say that if you're putting machine learning up there with fire, it's kind of hard to be, more open-minded about alternate approaches or a challenging approach.
If you say that all knowledge comes from the senses, okay, so obviously the amoeba developed into Einstein, right? You can't beat it. Amoeba did develop into an Einstein, okay? But can we wait for that sequence of evolution process can be replicated? That's one question, if it is feasible at all. The other question, we don't have the time to wait for that development, and we have so much to learn from our forefathers who have invented fire, and they invented the bow and the arrow, and we can imitate them. So imitation is a very important component. In addition to the imitation comes the reasoning. Why is this bow so much more efficient and this arrow so much more powerful than the other? Reasoning. I found the reason. So I duplicate it in a different way. So reasoning is part of our development. If you take away the reasoning from machine learning, all you have is machine learning.
Right.
Predicting devices. I call it data fitting or function fitting.
I wanted to shift gears to ask just a few other questions in kind of some different directions. But I first wanted to make sure that there isn't something additional that you wanted to say about, your work in causal networks.
I want to say something.
Yes.
That I learned that the ability of a subfield, a field or a discipline to liberate itself from orthodoxy depends on one or two leaders. All you need is one or two enlightened leaders in a field to make the whole field enlightened. And if you don't have this seed of enlightened leaders, the discipline will remain in orthodoxy for generation after generation. I notice it by my good luck of happening to befriend two epidemiologists in 1995 and so on. Eventually they published a paper in 1999 which turned epidemiology, which liberated epidemiology from the constraints of statistics and turned into enlightened disciplines. Today, causal graphs are second language to every epidemiologist. Okay. And look at the field that should have been the benefactor of causal graph, which is econometrics. Zero, and zero. Why? Because there weren't two enlightened gurus. There's another reason. Economists are extremely proud of their profession. So proud that they have an allegiance to the profession. And everything that comes from outside economists must be either invented by some economist earlier or no good.
Okay.
So that's a difference in style of different fields. And I found that this is the crux of the matter. This is what makes science move forward or move backward. Okay. It was a nice, I would say, revelation for me as an academician, which I only learned in the last 2 decades of my life. Yeah. Find one enlightened guru and you made it. And you move the whole discipline. Yeah.
Well, I guess it goes back to, that what you were learning in high school about the, science and mathematics being the story of, people reacting to other people, building and
right.
reacting. It goes right back to that.
It's a melting pot of social jungle.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I did want to ask, because this interview is related, related to your winning of the Turing Award. I just wanted to touch on that and ask you about what winning that award meant for you, if that was a validation of all your struggles or,
Let me just think about it. I have to.
Sure.
In computer science, it gave prominence to my work, a respectability. People didn't brush it off just like that, like they used to. But they took some time before they did. Before it took some time to consider ideas, and they took seriously some of my speculation, even if it was speculation. Outside computer science, I don't think it played a role, because people have, in areas where I thought it's important, like among economists, computer science have very low reputation. This is good for computer scientists, but not for us. Even in statistics, I occasionally find there's another way in computer science, but that's for computer scientists, okay? Not for us, real scientists. Okay, so it's not, didn't play an important role in my penetration into other sciences. But in computer science, it did. What else can I say about it? I had to explain myself to other fields within computer science, which was a good pressure for me. And I think I did a good job in my Turing lecture. And what else in here? Yeah. Probably it was a stepping stone for me to get other awards, perhaps the National Academy and other awards, like the latest one, the Frontier of Knowledge Award in Spain, where they really turned me into a rock star for 4 days. So, but otherwise, well, it does. I mean, I'm sure for many people, the fact that I had this award made them more curious about the work that I've done, and that's terrific. That means that young people, will have the courage to defy their professors, rebel, and learn something new.
Well, I wanted to, again, shift a little bit entirely to talk about something outside of your professional life that I know has been very important to you. If it's okay, I'd like to ask you about your work with the Daniel Pearl Foundation and your what it does and your aspirations for it.
Well, I should say that right now we are on a low burner. My wife has passed away, and she was the moving personality behind it. And I'm busy with fighting for science. So it's on a low burner. At the time, we felt that we have an opportunity. We have here a name of a person who is a role model in several circles. Among journalists, was a role model of decent and honest and of a journalist, and a good journalist. And among musicians, he was a journalist who always carried his violin with him to create connection, friendships with people in the various countries whom he visited. And for Jews, he became a role model of proud Jews, proud of his heritage, due to the last words that he said in front of the camera, "I'm Jewish," which I believe he meant. And if you have problem with that, it's your problem, not mine. So he becomes a role model for Jewish pride. And so we have three communities. And among Muslims, I should say, among Muslims who felt that he represents their own fight against their extremists. So we have here opportunity of inspiring people in 4 communities to change the core reasons for the hate that took his life. And we did everything we could, I believe. And I had a series of open dialogues with Muslims, city to city. We had a music days, which was beautiful 10,000 concerts in various countries. They're still calling me. They want to have a concert now in Taiwan because China is making threats, and they feel that the press, the freedom of the press, is in danger. So they want to make a music day with the name of Daniel Pearl there. So when people want to continue, we open the door and we help them, but we do not now solicit new participation due to the lack of strength, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where we are. And I do lots of work now, lots of work defending Israel. Yes, defending partly with the name of Daniel Pearl, that there is a reason to be proud, yeah, and partly because of the growth of anti-Semitism under the guise of anti-Zionism. So I work a lot in that area. I spent at least 40% of my time.
And how is that through speaking out or using
I speak out in high schools. I speak out in communities. I do Twitter. I have 61,000 followers in my Twitter account. So we constantly elaborate on issues when they come into news. And I write a lot. I write op-eds. I have maybe 100 op-eds on various issues of the Middle East conflict. I became an expert on the Middle East conflict. And I needed to, because I have to debate people who don't see things my way, and I have to know the facts and figures.
What are your thoughts about what's happening in this country today around these issues?
I don't know. It's bad. The polarization is getting worse. I think this country is going to split if it could, but it's hard for half of the country to secede. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know how a person, a pro-choice person, can agree with a right-to-life person. It's one issue that each side sees as basic of all basics. Okay? How can you deal with it? I don't know.
Well, let me ask a different question then about your hopes. Both from the sorts of issues that we've been talking about with, through your work with the Daniel Pearl Foundation, your hopes for the world, and also your hopes for the world of computing.
Could I have you scoot your chair towards David about 6 inches?
Up
Closer?
this way?
Yeah, closer, yeah. Get you out of that. I think that'll get down to the sparkles. There we go. Does that focus good? Yep. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll ask the question.
AI will solve the problem.
I should have.
I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, so again, it was your hopes for the world and your hopes for the world of computing.
Yeah, I think AI could contribute. Not now, but eventually, when you do have an understanding of the social fabric, the inner belief of one agent and another, there will be a solution or proposed solution coming from AI about conflict resolution. Perhaps a pro-choice guy could sit with a pro-life guy and come to an agreement with the help of AI system who will focus on their commonalities and will enable the two of them to communicate and work together. I can see it possible in the way that we handle conflicts in our families, in society. There are tricks and methods of conflict resolution. Unfortunately, those who learn the textbook of conflict resolution are the worst in handling real conflicts because they cannot transfer knowledge from one area to another. Some people say to me, if it works in Ireland, it must work in the Middle East, right? And I said, come on, guys, you don't understand the differences. Okay? But AI could do it because we have a method now of transfer learning. Okay? You understand the key differences and the commonalities. You renovate the former and you build on the latter and you create a new prediction or a new causal effect answer. Okay. So we have the basics. That's the basic. It's far away from doing it in a huge conflict such as the Middle East or such as the pro-choice and pro-life. Okay. But we can hope, I hope, that with the algorithms that will be developed eventually, with social intelligence, that AI computers and systems will enable us to come together.
That's great. I guess I have one last question that I had to ask. But before I do that, I just wanted to make sure to ask you if there's anything that we've missed out on, or that we should talk about, that you feel we should talk about that we haven't yet talked about.
I think we really covered everything.
Okay.
I was born in a hospital.
Yeah, we got it. The last question I wanted to ask is something that we ask everyone who we interview, and that is for one word of advice for someone who is starting out on their career or their educational journey, or just as a young person. If you could give those people one word of advice, what would that be, and why that word?
Well, insist on understanding things your way. Don't take no for an answer. Rebel against your professor. Okay? and understand things your way. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, I think that's all the questions that I had. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much for doing this interview with us. Yeah.